Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming in tonight. This is the event of the World Glutathione Association, Asia, and I'm very happy to see a lot of people involved with seeds and with organic and biodynamic agriculture. Sometimes then people think what we're doing is about agriculture, which is right, but it's not only about agriculture. When we do something about education, they think it's about education. It's right, but it's not only about education. Actually, our focus is entrepreneurship. It's about, how to run something, how to start something, how to initiate something, how to carry through with something. And so we're very happy to have here today Dr. Deb from India, who has been showing quite amazingly, I think in 25 years' time, how he is pushing through against all odds and doing something very important, which very few people in the world still understand today. People still believe that the milk comes from the pigs and the hamburger comes from the supermarket and stuff like that. So no wonder that they don't know that how important seeds are and how important different varieties of seeds are. So thanks so much for sharing today with us, Dr. Deb, and I'll hand over the word already to you. Salama, thanks.
Thank you very much, and namaskar, and very good afternoon to everyone. I can see many of my old friends here as well, and many new friends who will definitely, I'll get to know much better afterwards. So thank you very much, Walter. Yes, Deepa, I saw you there. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Frank and Walter, for this event happening. I will essentially speak what I presented, in the Philippines already about this, the importance of crop genetic diversity. The genetic diversity or maintaining the genetic purity of cropland races. Sorry, you said something, Deepa? Okay. So because we are all discussing that now the world has awake to organic agriculture, sustainable agriculture, biodynamic agriculture, and all of these. All of these terms, actually, the primary goal of this is sustainability. Sustainability of the farm output, sustainability of the earth, the natural systems, and human ecosystem as well. And the primary goal of this, the sustainability, and the primary means to attaining sustainability at the farm level is the essential mantra, which is zero external input. So as long as a farm is not yet attained this zero external input status, it's not yet sustainable. Of course, when we say external input, that includes the sunlight and the rainfall, which are from outside the farm. But accepting these two factors, anything that comes in, any matter or energy that comes from outside, whether it's the material of production like the seeds or the machinery and the agrochemicals, manures, whatever it is coming from outside, with and the expenditure of fossil fuel, which is energy, whether it's a machine like the pump set or tractor or whatever. As long as a farmer depends on any of these external material and external energy and transport, it's not sustainable. That's the main principle of agroecology. And therefore, when we talk about this internal input, that is farm saved things, all the things that's available at the most within the same community, if not on the same farm, but at least within the same community, not from outside, so that we need not spend a lot of fossil fuel in transporting a machine like a pump set, which we cannot repair or cannot be manufactured in the community. The first thing about this external input comes the seeds of the crops that we have to grow. And when the seed is in the hands of a corporation, seeds in the hands of a research institution of the government or an NGO even, it's not subscribing to sustainability, because every time, especially with the hybrid seeds, the farmer has to remain dependent on the supply of the seeds on an external agency, whether it's a and also to purchase the seeds, one has to get this, the external supply of money. It could be microcredit from an NGO, it could be macrocredit from a bank or a national subsidy or whatever. In any case, the material, the most essential and the primary material for sustainable agriculture is the seeds of the crops, which are therefore have to be essentially farm saved seeds. And they have different names, of course. Many people call it heirloom crop varieties. Some people say traditional varieties, land races, folk varieties, farmers varieties. Essentially, it's the same. I mean, the technical name is the land races. That means, the varieties, the farmers varieties, which were developed and evolved on the farmers selection, by farmer selection, selected by farmers, and they evolved on the farm in the local environment, adapted to the fine-tuned to the local environmental conditions. So those land races, these are not just for the cereals, rice or whatever. Every vegetable, every cereal, every fruit species that humans have domesticated have land races, because farmers themselves, the ancient farmers themselves, had created not only the species, new species, but also the varieties, which we call varieties or land races or heirloom varieties and so on. So I would like to share some of these the slides with you to show this for that, to clarify these ones, is that this is essential for this the landrace genetic purity is essential for any agrobiodiversity conservation, which is essential for sustainable agriculture or agroecology. So when we say that we have these crops, there is some misconception about this, the crop species or even domesticated animal species. Many people talk their natural diversity, they evolved in nature. Some people say they were created by God. Some people say, no, it's the fruits of evolution by natural selection. Neither is true. None of the crop species, the plant species that people domesticated, that we grow all over the world, and none of the domesticated animals that we maintain were created by God or not even evolved by natural selection. They were created by humans by means of artificial selection. And this artificial selection is the model for Charles Darwin, who talked about this as a model for his natural selection. And he actually contributed a huge volume of book on this artificial selection of crops and animals. So this domestication actually resulted in the creation of new species. When we say new species, it's literally new in the sense that that species did not exist before in the world. So, for example, the dog, for example, never existed before about 17,000 years ago until humans domesticated. The hunter-gatherers, early hunter-gatherers, domesticated the Eurasian wolf population, gray wolf, and created, after several experiments, centuries and centuries of experiments with the breeding, until they created this new species, Canis familiaris, which is today's dog. And not just the dog as a species, but humans also created many, many breeds of these dogs, Dalmatian, Alsatian, fox terrier, bloodhound, and wolfhound, and all of these kind of things. There are an estimated 16,000 breeds of dogs currently in the world. And all of these were created. They never existed and still don't exist anywhere in nature, in the wild, because they are domesticated. Similarly, for the cows, for the domesticated ducks and domesticated goat, domesticated camel, domesticated sheep, each of these species is a new species, distinctly different from the wild ancestral species which are still available today. Similarly, with the all the crops. This is just a snapshot of these and the crop species that people domesticated. Rice was domesticated. Rice and finger millet were the first of these domesticates. Some 12,000 years ago in China, and then 10,000 years ago for the Oryza sativa indica, 10,000 years ago. And then all of these, every species that we eat all over the world, survives on all of these foods, were domesticated and created by ancient farmers, which I call unknown, unnamed scientists, because they did not know anything about DNA or enzymes, but they achieved it. They created new species, and the creation of these new species actually had stopped virtually 3,000 years ago, about 3,000 years ago, with tea as the domesticate, and the European bunny rabbit also 3,000 years ago. Over the past 3,000 years ago, we have hardly ever added a new species, any domesticated species, despite all the brouhaha about scientific and technological progress and advancements. So each new species was created, and the varieties out of these were selected for different properties. So after this Oryza sativa rice, for example, I'm focusing on rice because that's the major thing that I work on, although I'm growing and conserving many other species as well. But focusing on rice because it has the largest number of genetic diversity available in the world. So what is a variety, or what is a landrace? It's the segregation of just like the dog breeds, it's the collection of, a set of characters which distinguishes one breed or a variety from all others. So just like Borzoi in Siberia is a huge dog, large size and almost like a small cow, to Chiu, which is a very small Chinese dog which can fit in your shirt pocket. So this huge range of genetic diversity was possible to isolate by humans by centuries and centuries of selection and breeding experiments. So same with these, that means each variety is an agglomerate of selected characters, and those characters the ancient farmers selected over millennia to serve their own immediate purpose to grow in that particular environment, in that local environment. So for example, the rice or wheat or maize or whatever, people selected for grain size, for taste, for flavor, for color, and of course for other agronomic properties like pest resistance and drought tolerance and flood tolerance and disease resistance, and then nutraceutical properties, high nutrition, like high iron content or vitamin content. Cooking time, that's another very important thing. There are some varieties of rice which takes long time, some varieties with very quick cooking, and there is at least one variety which we have discovered which does not require cooking at all. You don't need a cooking fuel, you just soak in water overnight and the rice is edible. It's almost cooked rice. So this way, these thousands of varieties or land races were created. Rice is currently is the champion of diversity, genetic diversity. In India, it was estimated 110,000 varieties until 1970, which is the onset of the Green Revolution. We have actually lost more than 90% of that diversity. Currently, there are just about 6,000 varieties left all over India. But not just rice, every crop variety that we have, wheat and corn and potato and barley, all of these, hundreds of varieties, thousands of varieties that were created by those ancient farmer scientists, unknown, unnamed farmers scientists. Nobody knows who created and who invented this basmati rice variety, who invented the jasmine rice variety of Thailand, and so on. But we have inherited them from, these are our heirlooms. And therefore, it's our duty and responsibility to maintain the genetic purity or the genetic signature of each of these land races as we have inherited from our ancestors. So zero external input, of course, we have already discussed that, all of these input, seeds, the agrochemicals and water and fossil fuel and machines like pump sets and all these implements, primary thing is seeds. So I'm focusing on seeds today, and this has to be within the community, has to be in the farmer's hands, must not be purchased or borrowed or on loan or subsidized by any government or corporate sector. And these seeds, when we say these land races or the varieties, it's not just the color and aroma and all of these, but also many extremely important life-saving properties for the farmer's family. These are the family, I mean, the families we depend on in the drought-prone area with very scanty rainfall or very low rainfall. Drought-tolerant seeds are the best bet. And opposite is the flood tolerant. In a region where it's frequently flooded, frequent seasonal flooding, or even perennial inundation of water occurs, then people can have to rely on the flood tolerant varieties of the same crop. So rice, for example, has several varieties of drought tolerant properties, flood tolerant properties, salinity tolerance, like in the coastal saline waters, like the Sundarbans and mangrove areas. People have developed many of these salinity tolerant varieties which can withstand seawater incursion. And these are the properties which today's genetic engineers are searching around. They are now they are what they call gene mining. They're operating on gene mining to find certain genes in different organisms and then incorporate those genes in the crop land races. This is the kind of work which our ancestors had already achieved. So we are actually now painting the lily and rediscovering the wheel every year with genetic engineering. The only difference is that unlike genetic engineering, the farmers' ancestors did not have to procure the genes from other organisms, from other kingdoms of, other animal kingdom, for example, or bacterial kingdom. Oops. But the rice genome itself has plenty of genes which they actually identified by selection and breeding, and they incorporated these sets of genes in different varieties or the land races. So it's not only the agronomic properties and these, the survival properties important for survival of the farm livelihood, but also culinary properties which contribute to the food cultures, the local food cultures, different kinds of culinary properties. Some rice is excellent for making pop rice, which we call rice krispies, the crisp rice, or pop rice, or puff rice, and the beaten rice, and rice for rice pudding. So different types of, and rice cakes. There are about 200 varieties of rice cakes all over India and Bangladesh, and each of these rice cakes is opportune if you use a particular rice variety in particular. So there are certain varieties which were actually developed only in order to cook a special kind of rice pudding. So this culinary properties is another a very important part of culture. Food culture is a part of this culture, which most of the cultural activists don't much mention about. And then we have this nutritional properties and medicinal uses and so on. So this is one example of this, one particular variety, which grows in 12 feet deep water. The photograph here is there's a plant which the last clump of plant after harvest. The farmer actually kept this last clump in order to show proudly for our photography. This is the last plant which is growing in 8 feet deep water. This man is swimming and is actually holding up on this plant. So 8 feet deep water, and it's still surviving, and it's already been harvested. The panicles are harvested already. So these are the amazing properties which have, and it's not that it's only the ancient farmers, even modern farmers still do it. This is a farmer who actually was growing the original one, which is on the left upper one, which is the white grain. And after, about 5 years later, he identified one particular variation in one panicle where the grains were red. So he chose that, and he bred selectively every generation. And after 8 generations, he developed a new variety with red rice, novel, stable variety, so that every panicle, every grain has this rice kernel. So this became a new variety created by this farmer. Encouraged by his father's innovation, his teenage son, he was then only 13 years of age, 13, 14. He's tried, he's kept on looking at these, different kinds of variations in the seeds. And after 2 or 3 years, he discovered another kind of variation. And then after 8 or 9 years of a very meticulous, rigorous experimentation with breeding, no tinkering with genes or DNA or whatever, simply breeding with the selected varieties and backcrossing with the parental type, he developed another new variety which is called black grain. So this is not just this, the uh, uh, not the specialty of the specialists or genetic engineers, but it's the illiterate farmers who don't know anything about DNA or the genetic fingerprinting or whatever, but they have achieved, just like these, these thousands of varieties they created, their ancestors, and they are still capable of developing these new varieties, and they are doing. Now, the important thing is that this is very important in genomic studies, because each of these morphological traits that we are describing, whether it's cooking property or the red color or black color or aroma or basmati rice or uh, jasmine rice or whatever, these are all genetic properties. They are heritable properties, and therefore the properties must not be mixed. So the genetic properties, the genetic makeup or the genotype of that variety is likely to be lost if you allow crossbreeding, or if you allow physical mixing of the seeds, so that if you have a handful of seed, a mixture of 2 or 3 varieties, when you grow this variety in the field, you get 2 or 3 different varieties mixed, and eventually after 2 or 3 years you forget which one was the original variety. This is exactly the case which is happening all over the world. In India, in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Malaysia. I have visited all of these rice growing countries, and the modern farmers don't really bother about the genetic purity maintenance of the varieties that they grow. Although they name the same variety, like with this basmati or Navara or jasmine rice, but in a handful of the seeds of the same variety, you'll find different size, different colors of the grains, and different aroma, or even no aroma at all, different size of on and so on. That's because of physical mixing or cross-pollination with other varieties in the field. So it's the responsibility of the farmers, which was for the case for thousands and thousands of years for all the traditional farmers all over the world. They maintained this genetic purity by a process they called roguing. And this genetic purity, these special characters, they looked at this, like the aroma, the leaf attitude, the node color, presence or absence of on, the size of awns, pest resistance, salt tolerance, and all of these. They actually looked for those characters, the uniformity of the characters, and every generation they checked whether these characters have changed or not. If it is changed, they called it off type, and they eliminated the off type to maintain the genetic purity of the original land race that they were cultivating. This wisdom of the practice and the practice of roguing is very unfortunately lost even to the indigenous farmers of all the country, most of the countries, thanks to agricultural modernization, because farmers are now habituated to getting the seeds from the seed dealers, the seed business. So because you pay money and you get the seed every year, you don't have why bother to maintain this seed purity of this the crop. That was the mentality. Unfortunately, this is the reason we have lost thousands and thousands of land races with modernization of agriculture. Now, most of these farmers have to, by compulsion, had to depend on the seed supply in the market by the seed corporations or the government seed supply. And that actually undercuts the very essence of sustainability in farming. This is why we are actually emphasizing on the genetic purity of the seeds. It's not just rice. If wheat characters, for example, is just very simple a few things. The awns, you see the needle-like features are called awns on the grains. So the wheats, the characters of the awns, one is appressed, another is medium, slightly spread, and totally spreading. Each of these are genetically fixed, and if you have variety A, you have to take care to make sure that your variety does not contain any other type of the spreading of the awns. if you have the spreading variety, you have to maintain that spreading gene, I mean the spreading feature in every generation. It should not allow mixing up with any other variety, with oppressed on or medium type of one. For the maize also, you have these rows characters, those straight rows, spiral rows, and irregular rows. Each of these is a different variety, different land race. It's the duty of the farmer to maintain the genetic purity of each of the land race over generations and generations, just as our ancestral farmers did. Uh, Unfortunately, with modernization, we simply don't care because we have forgotten the art and science of roguing and elimination of the off type, and we allow mixing of all the seeds so that in any farmer, an average farmer, if they grow maize, whether it's in Latin America or in India or in Africa, you will find different plants with different kinds of row arrangements. So different crops in the same farm, but they still continue to name it by the same name, which is not true, which is not correct. So if it's a variety A, it has to be the straight. Variety B must be spiral. Variety C must be irregular. There are many other characters. I'm just giving the most simple, visible characters and unmistakable. These are the barred millet characters, shape of the spikes. All these kind of different, candle shape and lanceolate shape and cylindrical shape and all of these. Onion or simple onion. How many of us have noticed the different varieties of onions when we eat them? Or everyone who actually works in the kitchen, when you slice an onion, that is the cross section, you can view this. There are certain varieties with single concentric circle, certain varieties with 2 or 3 multiple concentric circles at the core, and each of these is a different variety. If you allow them no cross pollination or not mixing, no seed mixing, you can maintain the genetic purity of each of these varieties on your home garden. Brinjal or aubergine, so many different shapes, and each shape is genetically determined. Unless you allow cross-pollination, each of these will maintain the genetic purity, and that's the duty of the farmer to maintain that this is Lal Moti variety in Bengal and Shada Deem variety, and all of these. Each variety has different colors, different shape, different size, and so on. I'm just focusing on the shapes, for example. And then within each shape, you'll have different colors, light purple color, deep purple color, black color, white color, reddish color, and all of this. There are so many of these varieties. So in India alone, there used to be 370 varieties, land races of aubergine. Now there are just about 35 left. That's this tragedy. For rice, we have many. I'm just giving a few of these. Actually, rice has 10,000 genes, but like maize and others, they have thousands of genes. But the characters, the morphological characters that the farmers have to check for are just a few. For rice, I myself check for 56 characters every year for every landrace that we grow. So one such character, very simple character, is the flag leaf attitude. Flag leaf is the last leaf. After this, there's no other leaf. So this is just by the side of the panicle. After the panicle emerges, then this is the last leaf. It's called flag leaf. So flag leaf angle could be erect, semi-erect, horizontal, and droopy. Each is different, and each variety has distinctive flag leaf attitude. If in your own farm you find thousands of plants have this semi-erect leaf, but 2 plants have droopy character or horizontal character, that means they are off types. You have to eliminate those plants altogether. Otherwise, you cannot maintain the genetic purity. Similarly, the node and internode colors. You can see this in the golden yellow color, and the green color, and then purple color. Even the node has this, the node is purple, node is green, and so on. So node and internode, these are also very important characters and genetic characters, characteristic of each different variety. So the same variety must not have both purple and green and yellow colors. All of these is impossible. That if you have this kind of mixture of these plants in your on your farm, this is not pure variety. They have lost the purity. So the reason that these the farmers actually tend to lose those characters is that rice is, so far it was known that rice is primarily a self-pollinated crop. But on my own recent publication, after rigorous experiments, we have proved that rice cross-pollination frequency exceeds 82%, which means, if you allow any of these, neighboring varieties growing side by side, on any side of your variety, it's likely that 82% chance of, or even higher, cross-pollination will occur, provided the flowering dates are the same. So when your variety has started flowering, may say today is flowering, and the neighboring variety also starts flowering tomorrow or the day after, within 2-3 days or 5 days, there is always a chance of cross-pollination, because the pollen is wind-borne, and the wind carries the pollen to your farm, and all your flora, the rice flowers, get pollinated without your knowing, because nobody can see the pollen. So unknowingly, you are allowing your cross-pollination, and therefore your variety in the next generation, all the seeds that you procure from after this cross-pollination will be impure. They will have lost those properties, and they have been replaced by the characters of the other unknown variety from the neighborhood. So these are different characters, not just in the leaf attitude and others. You can see this, the rice hull colors, different colors of the hull, different colors of the rice that you cook, and in the bottom row, and different others, not just the color, also the awn, that is this structure, spine-like structure. Also this, every rice has this sterile lemma, this short bud-like features. In some special variety, there are just about 6 varieties that in my collection, they have super long, extra long sterile lemma. This is a special, like wing-like structure. And some farmers actually are so fascinated by this, they maintain this rice variety only for this feature, not for any other property, because, oh, that's aesthetically so beautiful. And aesthetically so beautiful with this kind of color, this kind of, color of this purple, black, red, brown, light brown, white, and ivory. So many colors of these, and people actually prefer these. Our ancestral farmers actually preferred those, and therefore they maintain the genetic purity of these. That's the reason that we have still so many thousands of varieties in the Philippines and India and Bangladesh, and all of these still surviving despite all the onslaught of agricultural modernization. This is one unique feature which is very rare. It's called notch belly. It's an embryo-like shape of the kernel, the rice that you cook. All of the rice, you have this type of long, thick or thin, but the shape is typical of rice grain. But this one is a unique one. Just about 12 varieties in my collection of 1,440 varieties, we have discovered this character. All of these grains have this kind of notch belly character. You have this notch, which is an embryo-shaped character. I'm not going into the detail of the genetic character and the physiology, why it happens, but the fact is that the ancient farmers noticed this unique character, and they saved these, and they selected that particular variety and bred them for generations and generations to create a pure line variety, where every generation, every seed you grow has this type of character. That's a pure line. This is another unique property which I'm always proud of. Everyone knows that one single rice has one single grain or single kernel inside. Okay, you remove the hull and you get one single kernel. This is one unique variety where if you remove this hull, you get 3 grains, 3 kernels. This 3-grain rice is an amazing property. And in fact, when I talked with in the national and international gene banks, when I showed that this is one property, and I showed this photograph, this black and white photograph for the first time. I showed that this is the one, and this I removed, and this shows that 3 grains inside. Satin is the name. This is actually discovered in Bengal. It's a farmer's variety. It's not my creation. And Satin literally means co-wives. You have this husband grain flanked by these 2 co-wives, all living in the same house. Now, as a feminist, I would argue, why should it not be co-husbands with a wife in the middle? Why only the husband with two wives? But anyway, that's not my creation, so I cannot rename it. So Satin, the co-wives, and the husband, this happy family lives together in the same house. Now, this unique gene, we have recently, over about 5 years ago, we actually identified the gene which allows this ovary duplication, which allows the replication of these of the ovary. So it gives rise to 2 kernels, then 3 kernels, up to 4 kernels we have discovered very rarely, but 3 is the standard. These are the amazing innovations by unknown pharma scientists centuries ago. So we in our seed bank, which is now currently India's largest, world's largest pharma seed bank, and it's not unlike a gene bank. It's an open source. We don't charge anything. You don't have any formality. Anyone, any indigenous farmer can receive the seed for free in exchange of any other variety. So we currently have 1,440 varieties. This year we have added another 20. And we are growing all of these land races every year and maintaining the genetic purity so that every seed that we give to the farmers is 100% genetically pure. It's not just these, the visual properties and the aroma. Recently, now there has been a brouhaha about the iron fortification of rice in South Asia. And IRRI has developed, in collaboration with multinational companies, this red line, this number, IR681442B223. It is a large name. Of course, it deserves to be a long name, because to develop this rice variety of iron fortified, genetically modified rice, they actually invested several $1 million. So when you invest so many $1 million to develop this variety, it deserves a long name. So they give this name. And the height of this content of iron is 8.9 milligram per kg of rice. So you eat 1 kg of rice and you get 8.9 milligram, let's say 9 milligram of iron. Now compare this with all these farmers varieties. All of these, 60, 80, 30, 130, 150 ppm compared with 9 milligram. And now they boast in the publication of IRRI, they say this is one of the 3rd generation, the highest possible iron content in this, the GM rice. And this is being promoted. This was also introduced in China as well, several years ago. While we already have so many of these, rich in iron and zinc, now there's all these millions of dollars being spent and invested to develop this genetically modified, iron fortified and zinc fortified rice varieties, while we already have those varieties developed by these unknown, unnamed pharma scientists in different countries. So these the common sense would imply that if you really need this iron fortified rice for curing your anemia, you just make this you make these varieties available with this 85 ppm or 130 ppm available in the market, and you spread popularize the cultivation of those varieties. But common sense is very uncommon among the policymakers. So instead of popularizing those available free varieties, they invest these millions of dollars, and then they buy those seeds from IRRI or the corporation and then make it in a public distribution system in the name of scientific agriculture and scientific feed policy. Anyway, that's our unfortunate. But apart from this, the iron content and these are one minerals which are very healthy. But we have discovered the only rice variety in India, in the world, which contains silver in every single grain of rice. And the quantity is quite high, 15 mg per kg, even, higher than the iron content here. So 15 mg per kg of silver in the rice kernel. So if you eat it, you are consuming silver. Now, this is a chance discovery. We actually did not go for screening silver, whether it's not, but anyway, it's a serendipitous discovery. And so far, this is the only known rice variety in the world which contains silver. The use of this was that, it's a happenstance that the variety that we have discovered is called Garib Sal. And this Garib Sal variety was known as a medicinal rice variety in indigenous communities of Bengal. And they actually prescribed this variety as a diet for patients of any kind of gastroenteric derangement or infection, whether it's giardiasis, amoebiasis, dysentery, diarrhea, any of these, any kind of gastric and enteric derangement. They used to serve this, one meal of rice, full meal of rice of garib shal, and it's cured. Now we know why. Because this rice bran contains silver, nanoparticles of silver, and we know that nanoparticles of silver actually kills off all pathogens, gut pathogens, completely eliminates. So therefore, you eat this in one meal of this rice, full meal, and you eliminate all these gut microbes, including giardia and entamoeba and all of this, and you get cured. And they were also cautious to prescribe not for regular eating with the bran rice. If you want to eat this rice regularly, you have to remove the bran. Otherwise, you remove all the gut flora. So our indigenous people did not know whether it contained silver or not, silver or gold or whatever. But the empirical observation was that if you eat this, you get cured of this gastric. That's the empirical wisdom. Now we endorse that wisdom by our new discovery that it contains nanoparticles of silver. Similarly, we have different other new publications. In our lab, this is the only lab in India which works on this nutraceutical properties of hundreds of thousands of food properties, including these hundreds of landraces, rice landraces. We have discovered 350 varieties of rice which contains huge amount of B vitamins, and particularly vitamin B4 and B7 or B6 were never reported in rice. But we have discovered many of these rice varieties containing very high amount of vitamin B3, vitamin B4, vitamin B6, vitamin B11, B10, in addition to the normal B1, which is reported everywhere, B1 and B2. And these are just examples of these, the selected rice examples. The left column, the first column is the coded land races, all indigenous land races. And you have B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B7. These are just a snapshot of those varieties. And in some cases, they actually exceed many of these, the B vitamin rich fruits, which are prescribed by doctors. The last one that we recently discovered is another set of neglected rice land races, forgotten rice land races, which contain two essential fatty acids, which are found only in the human breast milk. So the mother's milk contains those essential fatty acids, which actually nourish the infant's brain development. So it's essential, those fatty acids are essential for the cognitive development of the baby in the infancy. And that's why mother's milk is very essential. And unfortunately, for the babies who are deprived of mother's milk for some physiological disorder of the mother, or the mother is absent or whatever reason, the only solution is the formula food, the baby food, formula baby food. So we actually compared European baby formula food and the Indian formula food and an American formula food formulations, and compared with this, and none of these formula foods contain those two essential amino acids. And therefore, in this paper, we argue, we recommend that in the formula food, if a baby has no access to mother's milk, they should be fed along with other food, the powder of this rice variety, any of those 46 rice varieties that we have just examined, which contains two essential amino acids. So rice is not just food. It's not just staple for half of the world's population, but it contains so many of the nutraceutical properties and essential elements for children, infant growth and brain development and normal health like vitamins and others. So these are all possible if you maintain the genetic purity. If you go for this rice variety, but your variety is mixed up, it's cross-pollinated with other varieties, then it's very unlikely that you'll get the same result, because your variety, that mixed variety, may not get those genes for manufacturing those two essential amino acids, or for the iron or the zinc that for which it's famous. So a farmer who has only impure seeds and who do not maintain the genetic purity of the land races that they grow will no longer have the arsenal to survive in the face of not only food. Of course, they will harvest the rice as food, but the special varieties which can survive in the marginal environmental conditions like drought or flood or seawater incursion, in those marginal conditions. And in India, for example, there are more than 30% of the arable land is marginal, which means, either drought prone area or seasonally flooded or saline, seawater incursion happens. In those areas, they cannot survive because those varieties which were proven uh, capable of surviving in those areas and yielding will no longer survive there, because those genes will be lost by cross-pollination or physical mixing. And therefore, as a result, she must buy those seeds periodically from seed industry, or at least from the government supply. Unfortunately, none of the government supply all over the world has any of those drought-prone varieties or salt-tolerant varieties yet available, let alone high-yielding varieties. So, and then of course, to grow those modern varieties, whether it's hybrid varieties or the high-yielding varieties, she must buy the agrochemicals, because without the agrochemicals, those seeds are designed to feed on agrochemicals and high input responsive varieties. They're called what Vandana Shiva calls high input responsive varieties rather than high yielding varieties. They yield higher only in response to higher inputs, unlike the traditional varieties where higher input leads to higher vegetative growth, not necessarily high yielding. But it actually, they rely on, all the indigenous varieties rely on slow release mechanism of the inputs. And of course, the knowledge associated with the cultivation of those varieties will be lost, will be replaced by the knowledge supplied by the industry agents, the industrial knowledge system. And in order to grow them, in order to buy the seeds every year, in order to buy the agrochemicals and the machinery, you have to borrow the money. Borrow the money from private money lenders or the bank, or even microcredit from NGOs. In a sense, you are again gone back to the clutches of unsustainability, all external input. So because of this, in the practice of hybrid rice cultivations and GM rice cultivations and these modern rice varieties, they have actually taken away the heirloom land races. The result is that the farmers have lost the knowledge of how to prevent cross-pollination. So there are two methods that we discuss, and we give trainings to all the indigenous farmers. One is flowering asynchrony method, which is my development. This is the paper that we published in Current Science. That was back in 2006. And where if you have a flowering date of your variety is today, you have to make sure that the neighboring varieties, if you are growing 4 varieties or 5 varieties, you have to make sure that all the other varieties flower on different dates. They must not match with date of each other, flowering date of each other. And the gap between the dates should be at least 6 days. So only then you can make sure that there will be no cross-pollination, because if your variety flowers today and the ovary is open, other varieties are not yet open. They will open only after 6 days, by which time your variety, this variety X, will have closed there. So there is no scope of cross-pollination, and vice versa. So that's one method. And the second method is, if you cannot identify, if you cannot determine the dates of these, then the only possibility is that physical barrier. You put up a physical barrier like a screen. It could be a cloth screen, it could be a jute bag, it could be a plastic or nylon cloth or whatever. Around that, the core sample of this area, it need not protect the entire patch, entire land, but only the patch of land where you maintain the seed. So only the patch where you harvest the grains for seed for growing the next year, only that patch you protect with a physical barrier, and that will be enough to protect it from cross-pollination with other neighboring varieties. So these are the two methods, and this is how, I wonder if any of you are familiar with the rice flowering. These are the flowers. The white things are actually the male parts, which are the in simple English, these are the pollen boxes. They contain all the pollens. They jut out of this, the floor when they open, and they release the pollen. Thousands and thousands of pollen are released, and they float in the air, and they are swept around to cross-pollinate the other varieties, not only their own varieties, but also the other varieties in the neighboring plants. And So that's how the cross-pollination occurs. And this date of this flowering, especially the 50% flowering date, is specific to each variety. So you have to know which date it flowers. And according to that, you have to plan the mapping of the other varieties around it so that they do not match. There's no synchrony. This is called desynchronization. So you desynchronize the date of flowering. And not only the date, but also time is very important. Until recently, nobody actually studied the time of opening, flower opening time. This is the first paper that we published in the world that we have actually discovered the flower opening time and the duration time of all these, the land races of South and Southeast Asia. And in different cultivation seasons, in the winter season and in the summer season. In both seasons, we actually documented, and we found that this is also fixed for different varieties. It's not any time that they open. Each variety has a distinctive date as well as distinctive time window when they tend to open. If there is a cloudy day, then they tend to open a bit later. On sunny day, a bit earlier, but the range is very, very narrow. And that is also a window which we can make use of. So if you have two varieties which flower on the same date, but they flower about 1 hour later or 2 hours later, then you don't have to put any barrier. There will be no chance of cross-pollination. I hope you understand the meaning that if they flower on the same date, it's likely that they will cross-pollinate. But if they flower at different times, say about 2 hours gap, then there is absolutely no chance of this, because rice pollen cannot survive beyond 9 minutes. So even if it is as close 9 minutes before, there will be no cross-pollination. So that's how we have to take care. And the farmers, or ancient traditional farmers, actually took note of those properties. Our modern farmers and even scientists did not take care of these. So after this is the core sampling. You don't have to bother about the entire farm. You select one patch of land, which is the core, which you select for the core sampling for your next year's sowing. That is the seed, only for the seed property. The rest of the land can go for your eating or marketing or whatever. But the core sampling must be for the seed, in which you have to be very careful and cautious and meticulous about maintaining the genetic purity of each of these plants. And then you have to process, you have to dry it in the sun. This is a standard procedure of for at least for 8 days, for 10 hours in the sun, from early morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you seal it in earthen pots. An earthen pot I always recommend, not in plastic pots, not in gunny bags, not in any glass jar or whatever, because earthen pots actually contain pores, micropores, which allow air, oxygen to flow through, which allows the seeds to breathe in, because seeds are all live tissues, live organisms. So they keep alive, but at the same time they prevent incursion by, entry of any insects, for example. That's no seed, insects or rodents or whatever. But in plastic bags or gunny bags, they're not impermeable. Rats and insects can always bore hole and get into it. So I always recommend this, and this is also a part of the indigenous knowledge system. This is why most of these ancient traditional rice cultures always used on this kind of either wooden or earthen pots, not plastic, not glass, not jute bags or gunny bags and all. Anyway, so these are parts of this knowledge system. So, and this is part of the rice culture. So when we talk of food culture involves all of these properties, all these mechanisms on the roguing practice and processing and storage techniques and the knowledge systems. And of course, the cooking practices. I'm not going into the detail of the cooking diversity of cuisines, which I'm sure that will be a very fascinating subject for many of you. We'll look forward to that next one. So I end this presentation here, and I hope there's been a lot of questions or clarification may be needed. I'll be very happy to answer this in case there is any clarification needed. Sorry, perhaps, Walter, perhaps I took a bit longer than required. Okay, thank you very much.
We would have loved to listen to you much more, because there's so
Okay.
much wisdom and
Thank you.
experience in there, so much science, which quite unbelievable. Quite
Thank you very
unbelievable.
much. Very kind of you. But, yeah. I try to avoid jargons, no technical jargons, as much as possible. But nevertheless, if someone has any uncertainty or misunderstanding, I'm open to clarification.
Hmm.
Dr. Deb, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
The 6-day gap between flowering to make sure there is no cross-pollination, is that only for rice? You're talking
No,
about
no,
it's just
no,
in
no. All cereals, wheat
all
also the same.
cereals. Uh-huh.
Yes, but I gave rice as an example.
Okay.
But all cereals. The only difference is that maize for corn, that is also cross-pollinated, unlike rice. So you have to be very careful to maintain it. It's primarily this, and many other open pollinated crops, vegetables, for example, they are necessarily cross-pollinated. I mean, they need other plants pollens, pollens from other plants. So you have to be very careful that those other plants must come from the same variety. Okay, so not from different varieties. So that way, if you have brinjal, for example, I mean aubergine, for example, and if you have 3 different varieties of aubergine and you allow cross-pollination, then the next generation you get all mixed up. All the properties are lost. So you have to make sure that the flowers of the same variety open and they flower together, I mean close by. So you can, in an enclosure, that you can have to make sure. Otherwise, flowers from other varieties also be cross-pollinated, unless they flower in different times or different dates. So you can check which variety flowers on which date and which time. Then it's no problem.
But Dr. Deb, what do you mean
Yes.
with flower at the same time? Don't they open for quite a while? I mean, it's not like they open and then close. So what do you mean?
Yes, they open. Yes, they open and close. Obviously, rice, for example, rice or wheat. Once they open, after half an hour, after 40 minutes, I mean, different varieties have different timing, flower opening duration. So after a certain span of time, say half an hour to 1 hour, they will close again, never to reopen. So they open, receive the pollen, fertilize the ovum, and then close it, and never to open. So this period is very crucial. So if you have 2 different varieties overlapping with the same time, there you have to be very careful. If it's on the same date and the overlapping of the time of the flowering is the same, then you must put a barrier, physical barrier.
Thank you.
In fact, the IRI, the International Rice Research Institute, recommends a physical distance of 110 meters between 2 different varieties, because rice pollen travels up to 110 meters. So you'll be very safe if you grow 3 different varieties, each of them 110 meters apart from each other. Now, this is physically impossible for a small farmer. And for me, for example, who is growing 1,400 varieties, I will need a whole district to grow them. So that's impossible, impracticable. That's why I developed this method of flowering asynchrony. So instead of physical distance, you give a temporal distance, I mean time distance. So 6 days, instead of 110 meter distance, you give a gap of 6 days of flowering. That's the gap. And then you're safe.
In corn, we have varieties, which are very, very short. They're varieties that take only 60 days, others take 90 days. So you do know their normal lengths of time till flowering,
Yes.
and you arrange it accordingly.
Yes, absolutely. No, but there is a catch here. the many traditional varieties are photoperiod sensitive, which means that regardless of you sow on the date, if you sow today, it will come to flowering on the say 12th September. If you sow this 12 days before or 20 days later, it will still flower on exactly that same date. This is called photoperiod sensitive. That means the plant actually counts the number of daylight hours on the flowering date. And whatever the calendar date, they will always come to that flowering date. But many varieties are not so. Many varieties are insensitive to photoperiod, which means you have to count the number of days from the date of sowing. Just that what you were describing. I mean, most of the modern varieties, for example, IR36 and IR8 and all these, they are photoperiod insensitive. This is why you can grow them 2 times in a season and 2 times a year, in 2 seasons, 3 seasons, because they are not sensitive to photoperiod. And therefore, you can calculate the date of flowering after 130 days after sowing, or 120 days after sowing, 100 days after sowing. Different varieties have different ones. So for them, those photoperiod insensitive varieties, you have to specify the date of sowing and then calculate the number of days to flowering. If it is photoperiod sensitive, then it doesn't matter when you sow. You have to observe, like the traditional farmers did. You have to observe every year when exactly is the date of the flowering of that variety. If you are not certain of which date, then it's safest is to put a physical barrier around the core sample. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I was talking to my wife. Did you say something about the physical barrier? How, I mean, it's clear the plastic wall or some kind of wall would be a barrier, or other possibilities for barriers.
Yeah, just a screen, any light screen, like it could be a thick cloth. Should not be porous like a net, so that it just collects the pollen, prevents the pollen from passing through. Any kind of thing, any lightweight plastic sheet or cloth, cotton cloth or silk cloth or nylon cloth, whatever it is, that will be enough.
You gave this example of the farmer that brought from a whitish rice, he came to a brown, and then his son came to a black rice, right? Would we call that breeding by selection?
Yes.
Yes,
yeah, that's right.
And if I understand,
breeding, yes.
Okay, and if I'm correct, you do not do anything like that. What you do is like conserving through maintaining the seeds by planting them, no?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. And maintain every year you cross check whether the same progeny, all members of that population has exactly the same characters.
Right.
So the leaf character and the node character and the grain character, everything is identical to all of this population. So virtually they are cloned to each other, for example.
Right.
Then you can make sure that they are absolutely pure. If any of the off type has to be eliminated. If you want to develop an off type into a new variety, that's a different story. But if you want to maintain the original variety, you have to maintain the genetic purity of the original one, and no variation allowed.
What you're doing is kind of like your science is to really get a hold of what is available in genetical material, right?
No, actually, this is the farmer's science. The farmers actually, the rice, when the rice as a species was created, rice has 10,000 genes, and that includes, black color of rice and brown rice and white rice and everything. But certain people, certain farmers were fascinated with black color, for example. So they selected only that population, and they multiplied that population alone within the same subpopulation and eliminated the other ones. So that way it was a kind of, siphoning that particular character. That is, minimizing the variation of those characters. So similarly with aroma, for example, the basmati aroma or fragrant, any of these fragrant rice varieties like in Thailand, jasmine rice and so on, the aroma is now discovered to be a result of 2-acetyl-1-pyrrolene is a property which is manufactured by one mutation of a gene, and that gene is called BADH 2.1. The uniqueness is that BADH gene is everywhere in all rice varieties, including wild rice varieties also. Wild rice means Uraza which is not cultivated. But the aromatic rice has one mutation where 8 base pair is deleted. With the deletion, that is a damaged gene. With this damage, the gene is unable to manufacture a very important chemical, which is betaine aldehyde dehydrogenase. And as a result of this, the aroma is expressed. And this is the recessive character. The importance of genetic purity is that if you have an aromatic rice, which means is gene from the genes from the copy from its parent, father, and the copy from its mother have to be, both contains this aromatic gene. Otherwise, if it is cross-pollinated with a non-aromatic rice, then the next progeny, every individual will be non-aromatic. In one generation, they will lose all aroma. You understand? So, because this is recessive character, 2 copies of the recessive genes, the damaged genes is necessary for aroma. But if with a cross-pollination with the non-aromatic gene, one gene comes with any parent, which is non-aromatic, then the whole progeny becomes non-aromatic, although one copy of the gene is still there. This is why genetic purity is so essential to maintain it. Even for a simple aromatic gene to maintain the aroma, and this is the reason why today you find basmati packets, many packets doesn't have aroma altogether. In Thailand, I have seen many of these marketed varieties of jasmine rice. 50% or 80% of these is not non-aromatic at all. It's because of the mixture. So, and it's not that the farmer had planned to adulterate it. It's, some there is adulteration, of course, but majority of them simply don't know how to maintain it, and that's how it's lost. But our ancestors did. The farmer's ancestor did know this for thousands of years. That's why we have this basmati, which was recorded by Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius, and our Emperor Shah Jahan, the Mughal Empire in 15th century, 14th century, and even today, exactly the same character of basmati, the lean grain. The basmati also elongates its grain. This is another unique genetic property. After cooking, it doubles the grain length. This is a unique property of basmati. It's not only aroma, not only white color, but also doubling of the grain length. So these 3 properties were reported by Shah Jahan, 14th century, 15th century, and even by Roman Empire, and they are still true today. That was the strength of our indigenous farmers' knowledge system. They were capable of maintaining this genetic purity until their descendants, who are now marginally scientifically literate and developed and progressive, they have lost all of this knowledge. So I'm happy that I have the scope to convey and transmit this ancient knowledge to a batch of new farmers again, so that they are not lost. Thank you very much, Walter, for this great scope of sharing with you. Yeah.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy that we can have you here. I have a question. We know I'm not dealing myself with rice, with everything else I always say, but not with rice. But we know, especially from vegetables, but also some cereals, people are not anymore able to digest certain plants. And that's why, we come up, or the breeders come up with more and more varieties which are finer and more digestible. And I'm not only talking about GMO, I'm also talking about biodynamic breeders. We are coming up with varieties that are more easily digestible. And I was wondering, how is that with rice? Are there also varieties that are, not anymore okay for some people today? And is there, do you know of organic biodynamic breeding that is looking at that? What is good for the people today? We have different needs than people 2,000 years ago, right?
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Rice is an amazing crop that wheat and maize has many kinds of proteins like gluten, and many people are intolerant of gluten. So gluten intolerance is a major concern for wheat eaters and corn eaters. I mean, many other cereals. But rice is the only cereal which does not have any gluten. So you don't have to breed a gluten-free rice unnecessarily, because rice normally doesn't contain any gluten unless it's genetically modified to do that. So that is one very amazing. And the rice has another property. Rice has a very high amount of labile starch. Labile starch means starch, all starch breaks down after digestion, breaks down into glucose. Okay, so you get sugar, more sugar. So you eat more rice means you get more blood sugar level, like any other starch. It could be wheat starch also. But rice has a part of this starch which is not only breaks down into glucose, but part of it actually enters the TCA cycle or the Krebs cycle to contribute to manufacturing of certain amino acid precursors, which means that some part of the starch also manufactures, helps in manufacturing or synthesis of protein in your body. And this is the reason why thousands and thousands of poor people in Asia survive only on rice and virtually no meat, no animal protein and all this. And this is the reason that part of this rice breaks down into this labile starch, which converts into it's not a huge amount, but a very minimal amount of protein, which is very unique property, unlike any other cereals. So unfortunately, all the developed varieties, the new developed variety, which actually focus on enhancing the starch content, all the modern varieties, they are actually delimiting the amount of labile starch. So the apart from starch, apart from carbohydrate, most of the modern varieties, you can't get any of this. Forget about the micronutrients like iron, zinc, copper, and vitamins. They are virtually absent in any of these. But even the macronutrients like protein is minimally absent, minimally present. And the only places where you get some kind of rice bran oil, that is the lipids, essential lipids, which is in the bran. But in the modern practice of polishing the rice before eating, you remove most of the vitamins, most of the minerals, and all of the fatty acids altogether. You remove them with the bran. So we recommend that is whatever the rice is, especially for this, the biodynamic or organic rice, whatever it is, try as much as possible to eat the bran rice or brown rice. So that you have to get all of these, excepting, of course, there is also a risk, as I mentioned, for the garib shal. If you have silver, you should not eat it regularly. Then you kill all the gut flora. So you have all diversity of uses and culinary practices, and our tradition already had them. The other thing I have to share with you is that this is a new discovery. Biochemists also have identified a particular type of starch which is called resistant starch. Resistant starch is a type of starch which does not break down in your stomach, in your gut. That means the starch remains undigested, just like fiber. So you have cellulose. Fiber is essentially cellulose, hemicellulose and others, which are not digested, so that they actually make the fibers, which is good for your bowels movement. That's why doctors actually recommend that it should not be pure food. It should also contain a lot of fiber. Now, rice, all modern rice varieties contain huge amount of only starch, okay, and all of this is digestible. That means it breaks down into glucose. So there you have a high glycemic index of rice. But we have discovered recently, we are going to publish it soon, we have identified 200 varieties of rice which has up to 20% of non-digestible or resistant starch, which means you eat 100 milligram of rice, but you actually consume 80 milligram of starch, and 20 milligram of starch serves as fiber that does not break down into sugar. So this is not actually technically it's not a diabetic rice, and there's a boo-ha about this. All the organic market says this is organic diabetic rice. There is no such thing. There is no diabetic rice. There is no rice with zero starch or zero glycemic index. Impossible. Any starch content means it has to break down into glucose. It cannot have zero glycemic index. Only meat can have, or eggs can have. But these rice, these traditional rice varieties, at least 200 we have identified, have very high resistant starch content, which means low, 20% low glycemic index. So this is in addition to fiber. I mean, if you eat bran, then you are already getting some fiber in it. In addition to that, in the rice kernel itself, you get resistant starch. So you get more fiber than is normally available. But that's a very good news for organic farmers who actually grow these indigenous rice varieties. So you get extra fiber for free.
Jel, did you have a question? Anyone else? Questions?
Yeah, I'm waiting from the audience. I'm sure there may be some of these.
Right, I don't count as audience, right?
Perhaps they are too tired to ask these questions. Too much of information.
Anyone? Else I will have more questions, guys. Please.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, myself, I have still a question because you said you do also other species, not only rice. Can you say a little bit about that? Why do you do that, and what kinds of species are they?
Okay. We are growing, we have this last year, we have grown 3 very old indigenous rice wheat varieties, 8 varieties of pearl millet, 8 varieties of finger millet, 6 varieties of barnyard millet, 2 varieties of pearl millet, 6 varieties of maize, 18 varieties of brinjal, 6 varieties of okra, 12 varieties of pumpkin, and 9 varieties of bottle gourd. So, and fruits, we have now about 6 varieties of banana and 6 varieties of 7 varieties of mango and like that. But those are not regular cultivation. They're, I mean, we didn't have to plant them. The mangoes actually were natural. They, I mean, collected from the village itself. So we didn't develop them, but all indigenous varieties.
That all sounds like basic foods. Is that correct? Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, yes, that's right. No fancy food.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the main thing is that now all the crops that we selected are appropriate to the agroclimatic region of that area. So we could easily grow dragon fruit, for example, from Thailand, I mean, Southeast Asia, or what are these, persimmon from Pacific. But because these are not appropriate for that agroclimatic region, I really love persimmon, for example. But in a conservation farm, we don't do that because our objective is to conserve those rare and vanishing land races. So persimmon land races is not the duty of me. It's the duty of the Pacific farmers to grow and conserve them.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last chance to ask questions or contribute in any other way. I guess everybody is just shocked by the depth of experience and information.
Well, I understand Deepa, one of the participants here. Deepa is my student. She is now taking training in rice conservation. Therefore, I understand she may not have much to question. I mean, not much to know extra. but I was
sir.
expecting some other questions. I mean, either I have been extremely clear, no difficulty in understanding, or I've been so difficult and everything is above the head.
Hey, Vijayaratne from
That-
Sri Lanka. Vijayaratne is
Oh,
Ah,
sure.
ah,
Please.
yes, good evening, everybody. I'm from Sri Lanka, Vijayaratna. Actually, now I am on the way, therefore some difficulties I have to face, but I learned a lot about Asian rice and the other our traditional varieties. Thank you very much, Doctor. I learned a lot actually. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you,
You're most welcome.
Walt also, and your wife.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much. Yeah. In fact, I just recovered from malaria, falciparum malaria, just a week
Yeah,
ago.
that's
So why
amazing
the meeting was,
that you made it.
because anyway, but I'm healthy now. Thank you. Probably because of this event, I had to get over quickly.
Doctor,
Yes, please, Mr.
Yes,
Chai
please.
Chong Chiu.
Mr. Walter, good evening. Good
Good
evening,
evening.
everybody. Okay, I was very
Good
happy
evening.
to learn the topic from Doctor this evening. Thank you, Doctor.
Most welcome.
Please share through email much more clearer. Sometimes I can't understand, but now
Yeah,
I learned
certainly.
how to go for agriculture like paddy, maize, something like that. I need to learn from Doctor.
I'm very grateful. Thank you very much. Very kind.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Great sharing. And
Yeah.
I will first stop the recording if you don't mind.
Yeah, certainly.